A young man, by the name of Issei Hyoudou, lived a terrible life. His father leaves him with a mother who blames him for things he isn't responsible for. When she gets a new man, that man turns Issei into a monster. He doesn't know what to do until he is given a purpose by a mysterious figure, and now the only thing holding him back is the monster chained to his heart. Archived. 1. There was a spark. I don't own high school DxD. Only OCs and all the bullshit I come up with. X. When flames rise, Chapter 1. There was a spark. X. Most people love their parents. They raise you into the person you are and help you with every step you take. They support you in every way possible. Sadly, we can't ignore that this only goes for most people and not all of them. There are parents that abandon their children and others who simply don't love them. And then there are parents like those of Issei Hyoudou. Issei's parents didn't abandon him. Well, his mother didn't. But she didn't love Issei. In fact, she hated the boy. Why? Because he resembled his and her father. He was a mixture of his grandfather and his father when it came to looks, and his mother hated both of them. His hair was exactly like his father's. Short, chocolate brown and messy. His eyes resembled those of his grandfather. A rather brownish hazel, piercing and focused. Issei's grandfather was a man who valued money over life. He rented his daughter's body without letting her have a word in it. He took the entire profit and cared poorly for the girl. As long as she looked good enough and always took the pill, everything was good in his eyes. She managed to escape him after she turned 19. One of his customers wanted her to ride him, and while he was in a bad position, she overpowered him, knocked him out and ran away. After 3 years she met a man in Kuo. A man who seemed care for her. A man she fell in love with. A man who would betray her. She had a child with him, Issei, before they married, but before Issei was born, the man left his mother. Left her behind to rot. She wasn't prepared for that and lost herself in sorrow and anger. Soon after Issei was born, his mother took medicine to stop herself from going away. The medicine turned into a drug. She became addicted to the drug. Then when Issei turned 5, he started resembling his and her father. It brought all the anger she had suppressed all those years out of her, and Issei was beaten for things he didn't do. The boy was afraid, scared that of his mother. And he was too afraid to call the police. Too afraid to ask the teachers at his school for help. Too afraid to run away. She hated him like she should hate her father. The one man who hadn't used or backstabbed her was her emotional punching bag. Issei didn't saw the purpose his life had. He was on the brink of ending himself, just to stop the torture, just to end his suffering. On his 6th birthday, on his way back from school, he was stopped by someone. Someone who was concealed by a hood that revealed nothing more than a pair of boots. Someone that would give him a new purpose. "You boy," a male voice spoke from the darkness of the hood. It was gentle, but powerful. Issei looked at the hooded figure with dead eyes and pointed at himself. His will already shattered. "Yes, you. I have something for you." A hand emerged from the darkness of the hood. It was the hand of a well-built man, but one thing about it was very distracting. It was pale, completely white. It held a necklace made out of a black chain and with a white feather on it. Issei hesitantly stretched out his hand and took the necklace. The chain looked cold and hard, but it felt warm on his skin. The feather was right above his heart. It made him feel complete. As if a part of him had always been missing and now he had a new purpose. He did not know what that purpose was or how he would fulfill it, but he would do so. He was sure about that. 1 year later his mom got together with a man. The man that would ruin Issei's life. He was a gang leader but looked way too handsome and young for his position. His hair was a really dark shade of red and his bangs barely reached his eyebrows. His eyes were bright purple and had a coldness in them. His skin tanned and he had scars everywhere on his body, except his face. His body was well built, but slim, and his smile was one that sent chills down your spine. Issei didn't like this new man. He had an ominous aura around him and everything he did seemed to be with ill intent. What Issei absolutely hated was that the man wanted to be called father by Issei. The headquarters of his gang was in a motel that they owned. It wasn't really a motel because only gang members were allowed to stay there. Issei stayed there. He wasn't beaten anymore by his mother. He never saw what she did, and he never asked. That didn't mean that his life went better. He was given the responsibility to keep the place clean. If he failed in the eyes of a member, they could beat him up for it. His father didn't really care. But one day he seemed to suddenly have developed a great interest in the boy. "Hey brat." Issei looked up from the floor. He was cleaning up some puke from a guy who thought it was a good idea to drink 5 bottles of beer at once. He saw into the cold eyes of the man he called father. His own were dead. He had learned to suppress his emotions. The man he once called father stood alone in the corridor. Most of the gang members were out at this time of day, patrolling or selling drugs. "Follow." His father walked to the basement of the motel. A part where Issei never had been to. The gang's prison. They walked down a long corridor. The corridor was filled with doors. At the end of the corridor was a white door with a graffiti tag on it that said, "Death Row." What would happen behind that door would change Issei. Opening it, the man who Issei called father revealed a man. A man blindfolded with his arms and legs tied to a chair. Dressed in nothing more than his underwear and with his mouth stuffed. His skin was littered with scars. "This is an old member of my gang. That fucker thought he could betray us without any consequences. Kill him." Then a gun was pressed into Issei's shaking hands and he felt a knife on his neck. "Don't try anything funny." Issei looked at the gun and then at the man who had heard the conversation. He tried to stand up and get away. Failing. 10. Immediately releasing what the countdown meant, he got the gun into a proper position. 9. He took a deep breath. 8. He aimed at the man's head. 7. Another deep breath. 6. He closed his eyes, tears running over his cheeks. I'm sorry, he barely whispered. 5. Bang. Issei opened his eyes. The man didn't move anymore. Blood was running down his head, dripping on the floor. A hole was in his head, right between his eyes. The blindfold had slightly fallen off and Issei could stare into the man's dead eyes. Issei had just killed someone. He dropped the gun and sunk to his knees. Good work. Issei didn't hear the words. He was too shocked about what had happened. He looked down at his hands. Those hands killed a man. Those hands could kill, and those hands were his. The man who he called father left the room, a sadistic smile on his face. He would come back later to pick up Issei. Issei barely whispered, I'm sorry. Silently asking for forgiveness, he once more looked at the dead man. He didn't want to kill him. In this situation the man was already dead. Issei could have thrown the gun away and the man would probably die the very same way. Issei would just join him. He revealed the necklace under his shirt and looked at it, tears in his eyes. He couldn't die yet. He still had a purpose. I'm sorry. It didn't change the fact that he had killed a man. The man in the basement. That's what Issei would call this experience. Sadly, he wouldn't be the only one to die through Issei's hands. The man who Issei called father repeated the process many times. It was like a ritual. Issei would be cleaning up something when his father would appear right beside him. He would be brought down to the basement and a gun would be pressed into his hands, then he just needed to shoot whoever was strapped down in the chair. A small part of Issei enjoyed it. That small part was Issei's monster and it grew with every man or woman he shot. It wanted to continue. It wanted to see more blood. Issei never knew he had this side and decided to lock it away into the deepest parts of his soul. If you were to travel there, you would see a monster. A monster restricted by thousands of chains, all trying to hold it. But it didn't stop to fight. And it grew stronger and stronger. How he killed also changed. Instead of hesitating and looking at his target, he now shot when he was asked to. His mask wouldn't break anymore. Tears wouldn't run down his cheeks anymore, but he still hated it and he still asked every soul for forgiveness. For everyone watching from the outside, Issei turned into a blind killing machine that would kill anything he was ordered to kill. He now didn't need to clean the motel anymore and he got his own room. It got to the point where Issei had his own gun always ready to execute the next target. His reputation in the gang skyrocketed. People didn't want to cross paths with him. They didn't want to annoy him. No one dared to touch him, even though he wouldn't react to being beaten up anymore. The time with his mother and the beatings he had received made him extremely pain tolerant. It was a miracle that he hadn't killed himself yet. He would have actually if it wasn't for the fact that he still had a purpose. Every night he looked at his necklace. It kept him motivated and it was enough to keep him moving forward. How many had he killed? Hundreds. Thousands. He didn't know and he didn't care. He just hoped that all of them forgave him. But then the day came where his mother made a mistake. The man Issei called father had forgotten to give her the drugs she so desired and in response she attacked him. A fatal mistake. His father saw this as an opportunity to test Issei. Another fatal mistake. Issei's door was opened. Hey, brat. Issei looked up from his desk, where his food was. Some kind of soup. Issei didn't care. He once again looked into the eyes of the man who had made him a monster. The man was smiling. A downright terrifying look. Issei didn't react. Follow. It's time to prove your loyalty. Issei ignored the words after the command and followed him. He didn't even need to follow his father. He already knew where they were going, and he knew that he would kill another soul. Arriving at the death row room, his father opened the door, like he had done many times before to reveal something Issei hadn't had expected. His mother, strapped down like everyone else he had killed. Some chains on the monster broke that moment. Show yourself worthy. Kill her and bang. The man who Issei called father jumped back in slight shock. He had expected hesitation or some kind of plea from the boy to spare his mother. A bond between a mother and her child was almost unbreakable. At least he thought so. He was convinced that Issei had now fully accepted him as his master and was willing to do anything for him. The man didn't even know how wrong he just was. Issei hated him. He hated him for turning him into a monster. He hated him for wanting to be called father by Issei. He hated him for making Issei kill all those people. But he didn't show it. I need to say, I'm impressed, son. The man had a proud smile on his lips. He had created a soldier that didn't question the command. A machine that did what it should do and nothing more. At least he thought so. Issei would have shot her the moment he entered the room. He just waited to see if the man would allow it, and when the words, kill her, were dropped he was set on ending his mother's life. It was the first time that he didn't ask someone to forgive them. It was the first time he enjoyed killing someone. With this I declare you my personal bodyguard. A fatal mistake. A mistake that would lead to his death. Issei's expression didn't change, but the monster inside of him started laughing. A laugh that would make anything freeze on the spot. A laugh that was filled with stored up anger from all those years of killing. Issei could finally take revenge. 2 weeks later the right time came. The man that had made a mistake went to a meeting with another gang leader and both agreed to only bring one personal bodyguard. Issei was the man's bodyguard. They walked to the meeting deep in the night. It would start at midnight in a small house in the forests of Kuo. For both gang leaders the meeting was extremely important. Both were ready to kill each other and for both of them it was a very tense. Issei didn't hear a word of their conversation. He just stood there waiting for the meeting to end or for the man to give him the command to kill. The second one never happened. Both leaders agreed on something and after shaking their hands they left with their bodyguards following. On their way back Issei made his move, but he failed. He pulled his gun silently, aimed at his father's head and bang! A hole straight through the brain. What happened next wasn't normal. The man he had just killed looked at him with disappointment and pity. The hole still in his head, but no blood was dripping from the wound and the man was still alive. Did you really think I was a mere human? No reaction from Issei. Bang! Another hole, this time through the heart. The man looked down at his wound and back up at Issei. He was annoyed and disappointed. And here I thought I had you, what kind of idiot am? Bang! Kidney. The man started walking to Issei, who backed up in response. Look, you can't kill me by shooting this body. It doesn't work like that. Bang! Liver. Issei hit a wall with his back. Okay, normally it would work, but in this case it doesn't. You get what I mean. Bang! Genitals. The man stopped and looked down once more. Really? Bang! Right shoulder. He facepalmed and continued approaching Issei. Just stop already. Bang! Left eye. The man reached Issei and grabbed him by the right hand. With one hard pull he ripped it off. Issei didn't react. Wow, you're not barely 13 and you don't show a reaction after your arm was ripped off. Gotta say, didn't expect that. His eyes locked with Issei's as he punched him straight through the heart. He pulled his arm back and turned his back to Issei and started walking away. Well, you were fun while you lasted. Issei still stood there. He wasn't supposed to die yet. He didn't want to die yet. He wouldn't die yet. There was a spark. The man froze. His eyes widened. A fire lit up in the darkness. Issei felt a new energy in his body. Burning hot, but comfortable warm. The fire spread. Issei took a step forward. The man who had killed him turned around and looked at the boy who should have been dead by now. Consuming everything in its path. Issei's chest lit up in white flames, as did his right shoulder. The hole in his chest was filled and his arm grew back. Nothing would stop it. Nothing could stop it. Issei smiled. A chill ran down the man's body that was strong enough to break someone's spine. It wasn't just the fact that the smile was bloodthirsty, it was the fact that Issei's expression had changed. All those years Issei's eyes have been dead and his face was the embodiment of emotionlessness. Seeing him smile was just wrong. Something emerged from the flames. The ground under Issei somehow caught fire and that fire quickly spread into the man's direction. He couldn't move. It was something was pressing down on his body, stopping him from acting. It stood, watching its flames consume the darkness that once held it in place. The flames reached his feet and immediately began consuming him. It was painful. He couldn't scream, but a scream wouldn't be enough to show what kind of pain the man was feeling. The creature revealed its wings. Issei's normal expression only returned after the flames had fully consumed the man he hated. The monster inside of him was laughing. It felt alive. Issei might not let it go, but that didn't mean that it could enjoy itself. And this act of revenge brought more than just joy to its dark heart. And it took off. The flames disappeared and revealed what had happened to the man that attempted to kill Issei. Not even ashes remained. Clap, clap, clap. Issei turned his head to where the sound came from and saw the figure who had given him the necklace all those years ago. So you have awoken. He pulled back his hood, revealing a pale white face of a handsome man with warm cyan eyes and black hair with dark blue bangs bound into a very short ponytail that only reached his shoulders. Issei, or should I call you? A sly smile appeared on the man's lips. Phoenix. Issei's face remained stoic, but his interest grew. Ch1 of 10 next. 2. Not even ashes remained. I don't own high school DxD. Only OCs and all the bullshit I come up with. Equals 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 x equals 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 x equals 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 equals. When flames rise, chapter 2. Not even ashes remained. Equals 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 x equals 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 x equals 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 equals. Last time. Issei, or should I call you? A sly smile appeared on the man's lips. Phoenix. Issei's face remained stoic, but his interest grew. Don't worry, I'll explain. The man turned around, now facing the Kuo forest. He signaled Issei to follow. After some hesitation, the boy did. The man waited until Issei had caught up to him before starting to talk. Where are my manners? I haven't introduced myself yet. Just call me Dante. Hearing the man's name, Issei got a little bit confused. Wasn't that the one guy who traveled through the underworld? Yes, that Dante, but there are some misconceptions about my story and parts that were completely left out. I didn't travel through the underworld. I traveled through hell. Not the same thing. Anyway, after I went through hell, I met death. Yes, death itself, and seeing how I went through hell without losing my body or sanity, it made me the first Grim Reaper. I was pretty proud of that title and thought high of myself, until I received my first mission. They entered a forest and walked down a path. It was a rather narrow path, and you could barely differentiate it from the normal forest ground. It wasn't used in a long while. The mission was to kill the Origin Phoenix, not the legendary one. I'm going to explain that later down the line. Anyway, I had no option other than to oblige, but the Origin Phoenix could not die. It was born before death was a thing, so death could not claim it. I knew that if I was to return with empty hands, death would kill me. No pun intended. What surprised me was that the Phoenix offered me a deal. I would bound my soul to it, so that I only die when he dies, and for that I stay loyal on his side. I obviously agreed, and now I'm bound to the Phoenix and death cannot claim either of us. Dante gave Issei a bright smile. Issei didn't react. You're probably wondering what you got to do with any of this. Well, the Origin Phoenix existed since the universe started, and when you exist for such a long time, it's basically your destiny to make at least one stupid decision. He was stupid enough to make himself require a host. While he had no host, I was on a mission to transport him during a dormant state and find a new fitting host for him, by searching for determined souls. When I find such a soul, like yours, I give them a tiny amount of the origin's power and wait for a decade to see if they can fully awaken it. Issei looked at him with dead eyes. I would call it a deadpan if it wasn't his normal expression. Yes, you were the one I chose to test when I gave you the necklace. You successfully awakened the phoenix's power in yourself and could even use presence even though it was your first time. That's really impressive. If you're asking why you're so determined, then I sadly have no idea. If you're asking why the host needs to be determined, then I have the answer. They were already pretty deep in the forest. You could barely see the path on which they were walking and there was no trace of Kuo left. You see, the origin phoenix can't die, but its host can. Your life force is now bound to how determined you are to live. If you give up and don't have any reason to go forth anymore, a simple decapitation can kill you. If you are determined to move forward and refuse to die, you still live on even if your entire body would be eliminated. Age won't be a problem. If you truly unlock the phoenix powers in time, you would turn immortal. Time would stop affecting your life force and only your determination would be needed for you to exist. Issei thought about that. Immortality. Something he had never considered. Of course, you also got an affinity to fire, but first let me explain what exactly the origin phoenix is. The origin phoenix is technically a dragon. Why? It was born from pure energy. When the universe started, there was a point of extreme heat and energy. That point was the origin phoenix. The legendary phoenix was one of its first hosts before he put me under his wing. Don't even ask me how he thought giving a bird immortality was a good idea. It did some bird things it desired to do, spread the legend of the legendary phoenix, and died of old age afterwards because it had no reason to life anymore. So the phoenix is a dragon. And that dragon is inside of Issei. No, part of Issei. Normally there would be some kind of reaction upon hearing such news. Issei just continued walking, his expression unchanged. So I am going to train you for the supernatural. The origin phoenix is far from the last supernatural existence humans don't know about. Your father figure was a demon, not a devil. A demon. Yes, devils also exist, as do angels and fallen angels. Most mythological creatures exist, but the stories around them are mostly wrong. And most, if not all, factions of the supernatural will want to get you on their side some more forcefully than others. So I got to ensure that you can defend yourself and, in the process, unlock your true power, so that you don't die in 100 years or so of old age. Well, that was obvious. Issei didn't want to end up as a slave, nor did he want time to fuck with his immortality. My powers are also bound to yours, so I'll also grow in power when you get stronger. I have my own little supply of power that currently makes me around bottom ultimate class, but I can't improve from there until you yourself reach ultimate class or above. Some kind of shockwave came from Dante and turned everything it touched gray. Don't worry about that, I just created a pocket dimension where we could train unnoticed by anyone else. A malicious smile formed on his face. Now let the training begin. Dante summoned stretched out his hand as if he was trying to grab something. A spark lit up between his fingers and ignited into a white flame that grew vertically in size before disappearing and revealing a rod. The rod was made out of a blackish metal and filled with ancient-looking runes that were carved into it. At the very top it got a bit thicker and there was a vertical hole in the rod where you could slide something the form of a sword through. Dante grabbed the handle and the runes around his hand lit up in a cyan color. He seemed to channel more energy into the rod, because now every single rune on the rod started glowing after a second or two. Then a blade came out of the hole in the handle. It had the form of a typical scythe blade but was made out of a white glowing material that seemed to move within the blade. The blade was made out of compressed flames. Issei, still looking at the blade, was a little confused when it disappeared. Then Issei felt his upper and lower body disconnect and looked down just in time to see a foot hit his chest. Now he hit a tree and was stuck halfway in it. Well, his upper body was. His lower body was still with Dante. Never mind. Dante is right in front of him and preparing another swing. Issei stood no chance and was thrown around for the next 5 minutes or so. Was this how it ended? He would just give up in a training fight. Issei refused to go out in that way. His body and mind responded. Time slowed down. He started moving at the same speed Dante was moving. Everything seemed to suddenly slow down. Dante himself didn't blur out anymore to reappear. Issei could see him running. In that moment Issei decided to beat him. His body was enveloped by white flames and regenerated almost instantly. His gaze followed Dante's every movement. His flames spread out over the ground, covering most of the area, ready to strike. Dante leapt at him, his scythe over his head ready to slice Issei apart once more. Issei ignored it and concentrated his own fire. He saw that fire could be compressed into something like a blade and could be used to stab or slice people. He tried copying the move. The flames on the ground grew into a spike-like structure growing into Dante's general direction at rapid pace. The tip was sharp enough to pierce through metal and the heat it gave was enough to melt the trees nearby. Yes, melt, not burn. Dante barely dodged and had to stop his attack to gain enough momentum to outpace the growing spike. Issei didn't allow him to get far. 1,000 smaller pillars were raised from the direction he was heading to and another big one came from the first pillar itself. Dante tried cutting through them, but Issei was still determined on beating him and every flame on the ground and every spark in the air started growing and attacked Dante in various ways. Some shot forward at incredible speed and others grew trying to literally consume Dante. Somehow the Reaper avoided most of them with some magic and clever usage of his scythe, but Issei could see the exhaustion on his face, which prompted him to step it up a nudge. More flames. More fire. More. Dante had his back turned to a wall of fire and was facing another one from the front and all other sides. He was impressed at the level of control the Young Phoenix had. Most people first needed to learn how to not burn themselves, but this one already commanded every single flame he created almost perfectly and individually. Normally learning how to control all the flames you have while making more took a long time to master. And having two flames make two different things was even harder, but this boy, Issei, did both of them at the same time on his second usage without any visible problems or lose of stamina. It seemed to come naturally to him. That meant that he could be the one who would stay. The one who would truly become the origin Phoenix. The thought of something like that happening brought a smile to Dante's face. If Dante wouldn't be so familiar with the Phoenix flames, he wouldn't have lasted half as long as he did. Other creatures on mid to high's ultimate class would stand no chance against Issei with only very few exceptions. After half an hour of Dante dodging and running, he got hit on the left arm and immediately cut it off. It was better losing an arm than losing his whole body to the flames. Then he felt that his magic reserves were coming to an end and signaled Issei to stop. The boy did so and pulled back his flames. The pocket dimension was a mess. The area where Issei had started with his flame control was a crater. The flames have burned through the earth at that point. The plant life was completely eaten away by the flames and only very few remained at some borders of the dimension. Those that weren't completely burned were literally molten, as was the earth. The dimension shattered and Issei found himself in the spot where he was when Dante had created the dimension. Oh shit, your energy. Dante had forgotten to suppress Issei's energy while they were in the dimension. Now that he had awoken a big part of it, it was flaring wildly around and needed to be masked. Thankfully, there weren't any strong forces and Kuo, Rias and Sona aren't here yet. Some strays may come search for them and if they were really unlucky a yokai had been in the area. Who would really come was unexpected. Dante sat down leaning onto a tree. I'll be taking a nap. Wake me if anything happens. He immediately dozed off. Issei looked at him, his expression not changing. There was the sound of a magic cycle. Issei turned around and looked a young woman in the eyes. She had sapphire blue eyes and general blue waist long hair and was wearing a light blue open jacket with a dark blue tank top that didn't really cover anything up and revealed it more or less. She had blue jeans and of course blue sneakers. The only thing that wasn't blue was her skin. It was a light pale, but not even near on Dante's ghost level. An interested look was in her eyes as she looked up and down Issei. Issei didn't mind and just continued staring into her blue eyes with his dead ones. She tilted her head slightly and locked eyes with him once more, before taking a step closer. And another one. And another one. She now stood almost directly in front of Issei and it was clearly visible that he was at least a head smaller than she was. Granted he was barely 13. Slowly extending her hand she pointed a finger at his head and that came closer and closer, before touching it. Issei's eyes were still fully focused on her eyes. After 3 seconds of touching him without getting a reaction her eyes suddenly widened, her breath were heavy, and a blush creeped up her face. Perfect. Her eyes were now lustfully fixated on his and Issei could not help but blink in slight confusion. There was the sound of a magic circle. He found himself again in a cave and the next moment she jumped on him. He wanted to retaliate with an attack of his own until the hormones hit him. He might have suppressed his emotions to the point where they don't even exist anymore, but he never had to deal with hormones and he just hit puberty. So instead of unleashing his flames and engaging in epic combat, he stayed put and analyzed the weird feelings his brain was trying to force on him while the woman he had just met seconds ago was pressing her body on his in a very sexual way. Little Issei suddenly had a mind of his own. His personal place suddenly went hard without Issei commanding it to. He didn't even know that they could do that. Now he felt the woman grind her private parts on his private parts and his brain tried to tell him that it should feel good, but instead of feeling good, Issei felt intimidated and made a decision no other sane man would do in this situation. Can we even call Issei sane? He castrated himself. He had more than one reason for this. First off, he could easily regenerate later. Second off, his private parts weren't currently under his control and he didn't want to know what would happen if they fully went out of control. Third off, it stopped the part of the brain that told him it should be feeling good. How he castrated himself. Flame sword, duh. Judging from the sudden change from lust to confusion in the woman's eyes, he could tell that that wouldn't be the normal reaction. She froze and blinked multiple times before searching with her crotch for his little Issei. After not succeeding in finding it she crawled down and looked for herself. After verifying that Issei had in fact castrated himself, she looked him in the eyes with an, "Are you for real?" Look in them. Issei just blankly started back. Did you just castrate yourself? Issei didn't react and just kept staring into her eyes without any change of expression. You're a weird one aren't ya? Still no response. I'm keeping you. Now that got a blink out of Issei. Oh yeah right. Introducing. I always forget that part. My name's Tiamat, the Dragon Queen or the Chaos Karma Dragon. And you are. Ah yes, the part where Issei got to speak for a minute or so Issei just started at her. He didn't speak. The last time he said anything was when he asked his first target for forgiveness. Could he even speak anymore? Thankfully, Dante came to the rescue. He's the new host of the Origin Phoenix, Issei Hyoudou and my mate. Issei was pulled into her embrace and held there. He didn't mind. Tiamat had proven friendly. And you are. It was more a command than a question. Her eyes showed a reptilian anger. She was ready to fight for Issei. Do not worry, Dragon Queen. I am Dante, your mate's loyal servant and literally bound to his soul. Issei felt Tiamat's grip relax. Huh Phoenix, I could swear you feel like a dragon. Dante's eyebrow twitched. He is a dragon. Tiamat blinked twice, frowned, and looked from Issei to Dante, back and again to Dante. The Phoenix is a bird the last time I checked. Dante massaged his temples and mumbled something about fucking feather sacks before looking back at Tiamat. That is only partly true. You see, the origin Phoenix, like in the Phoenix, requires a host, and the most well-known host is that annoying bird who was named Legendary Phoenix and was believed to be the Phoenix. The stupidest part about this is that people seem to not notice the absence of that very same Legendary Phoenix, because he died after not being able to fully unlock the origin Phoenix's powers. And then the next few hosts came until I joined the origin Phoenix, then some more came, and now we have this boy as the current Phoenix. And if you ask why you haven't heard of other people that called themselves Phoenix, that's because most of them desired to live peaceful lives and didn't really interact with the supernatural, while others just utterly failed to unlock the Phoenix and died through really stupid means, like challenging someone far above their power level. There were a few seconds of silence, until Tiamat spoke. On how does that make him a dragon? There was once more silence, during which Dante looked at his hands in a, how fucking stupid am I, kind of manner. Well, he was born from pure energy. Tiamat nodded. Yep, he's a dragon. She turned her gaze back to Issei, heart seemingly appearing in her eyes. My dragon. A magical circle appeared under the two dragons. And now I'm his familiar. Dante's sweat dropped. X=X=X=X=. 4 years later, Issei bought a house on the other side of Kuo and got enrolled in Kuo Academy. Why did Issei enroll himself at Kuo Academy? Well, it was more a way to search for another purpose than to interact with people and learn stuff. Stopping Tiamat from jumping him was a good purpose, but it wasn't active all the time, because Tiamat didn't jump him all the time, at least not anymore. She still visited him almost daily and cuddled him every chance she got, but as one of the 5 Dragon Kings she had to defend and sort out problems in her territory, aka the familiar forest. It was funny to think that devils claimed this town 3 years ago as their own, even though Issei lived here and it was technically the origin Phoenix's territory, but he didn't mind. The 2 devils in charge were really young and inexperienced, and until now they haven't seemed to notice him. Maybe he could make it his purpose to get them out of his territory. No, bad idea. From the minimal knowledge he had over devils, he knew that the current Lucifer was a Grimoire and the current Leviathan a Sidir, and by letting Dante spy on them he found out that the devils in charge carried the names Rias Grimoire and Sona Sidir. He really didn't want to aggravate 2 Maos. Issei wasn't scared of them. He could easily survive the battle, but he really didn't want to get on the devil's bad side. It would just end up annoying, and he would be hunted down by some idiot devils that try killing him, and he would gain a lot of attraction, and many different factions would probably try and recruit him. And the fact that killing 2 people out of pride could trigger his monster to free itself. That just wouldn't end well for anyone. Knock, knock. Hey, Issei tilde. Ah yes, today was the first day of school, and as expected Tiamat had also enrolled herself in Kuo Academy and somehow had gotten a place right in his class. She asked him to call her Mio Hiryu while they were at school, because that was her cover name, but that action caused Dante to almost scream in confusion, because Issei didn't speak. Well, currently Tiamat is waiting for him outside his door, so that they can walk to school together, because there's no way in hell that she doesn't introduce herself as his girlfriend. Issei looked at the watch on his arm. It was 6:55 a.m. Kuo Academy was 10 minutes away and school started at 8, but they were asked to be there at 7:30, because they were new students and they still needed some papers or something along those lines. Issei stood up and looked at himself at the mirror. It wasn't like he cared for his looks, he just didn't want to cause attention by violating the school rules. He hated attention, because attention from the normal students would get him attention from the supernatural ones, and he really didn't want their attention. Seeing that he had nothing to worry about, he went to the door and opened it to reveal Tiamat, who was wearing a school uniform by herself, pulling down the skirt. Man, who designed this must be a massive pervert. The don't hide anything in the chest stands extra out. Thanks to it being the only white spot on the uniform. Dante appeared next to them. Gotta agree with that. Issei just looked Tiamat in the eyes and started walking to school. The Dragon Queen quickly following and grabbing his hand and enveloped his arm in her breast. Not that he minded. He had learned to suppress his hormones. Arriving at the school gates, he was immediately glared at by almost every single male student, because of him already having a girlfriend, and a hot one at that. No way. Look at how lucky he is. How does someone like him deserve something like that? Oh look, a new beautiful girl, and she's taken. Why fate? Why? One day, sniff. Yeah, advanced senses might be nice, but sometimes what he heard was just annoying or straight up stupid. Might as well ignore it. X=X=X=. Sona was a rather composed person, but when she saw the 2 new students she almost ran off. She was rather unique, because she hadn't just gotten the Sidir clan's power over water, but also the Rame clans, who are now extinct due to her mother having passed, advanced sensing. And those sensing powers told her that the 2 new students were using power suppressors. The cruel joke was that both had their unique suppressors, and both had extremely high quality suppressors she couldn't identify. That was very scary and meant that both of them were at the very least high mid-class, because if they would have had someone else give them suppressors, then the suppressors would feel similar, but both were completely unique. It required a lot to make such high-quality suppressors and also a lot of energy to sustain them as flawlessly as both of them did. The blue-haired, blue-eyed girl didn't show any signs of energy lost, while the boy just didn't look alive at all. Wouldn't it be for the fact that he was moving, and she could sense his heartbeat and breath, she would have been easily convinced that he was indeed dead. His face was blank. Blank on the level where Kaneko appeared like a hyperactive girl in comparison. His mouth was nothing more than a slit on his face and his eyes were cold on dead, not focusing on anything they met. It really creeped her out, and by the looks of it other students also didn't feel safe around him, only the new girl that was basically glued to his arm looked happy around him. Those two weren't normal. She had to tell Rias that those two were possible threats and that they might be able to single-handedly overpower both their peerages. A shiver run down her spine. How did they manage to get into Kuo? What were their intentions? Did they mean any harm? She had to find out. But for now she just needed to act formal and friendly. Good morning, I'm Sona Shitori, the student council president. Am I right to assume that you are the new transfer students? Sona looked down at the paper in her hands. Issei Hyoudou and Mio hear you. Mio nodded in response. Issei just looked at her with cold eyes. He was focusing on her and that made her feel really uneasy. It was like staring down into an endless pit filled with nothing, absolutely nothing. Before she could lose herself in that infinite nothingness, Mio pulled her back into reality. Yes, that's us. Are you here to show us around? Sona immediately looked into Mio's eyes and tried to ignore Issei's cold gaze still on her. Yes, I am going to show you around the school, so that you have a basic layout of the school grounds. Sona started walking, not really caring if they followed her. A part of herself even hoped that they just didn't. While she was trying to calm herself, Tiamat was talking to Issei via mental link that familiars have. She could sense us. How she reacted wasn't natural at all. She was trying to hide her fear, but it looks like she doesn't know who she's dealing with. Single quote ellipsis single quote. She would have instantly panicked if she knew who I truly was, but she didn't. But now the devils know about her presence. Shit. Single quote ellipsis single quote. I didn't know that she got the Rain clan ability. Her mother was the last member, but now it's already too late. They are going to want to talk with us sometime. Single quote ellipsis single quote. Some people would question if Issei was even listening, while other people would be confused by how he doesn't even talk in his mind. Well, first off, Tiamat knew that Issei might not be a big talker, but she knew that if he was willing to, he would hear every word of a conversation. And for the second point, Issei doesn't talk. After being shown around the school, classes have already started and the pair of dragons was led to their classroom where they parted ways with the devil. Tiamat knocked on the door, getting her homeroom teacher's attention. Come in. She opened the door and was immediately greeted by a lot of stares from the other students. These are our new students. Please introduce yourself to the class. Tiamat put on a fake smile before speaking. Mio hear you, I'll be in your care. Wow, look at her body, I wished I was that beautiful. Isn't that the girl from earlier this morning? That means that he's her boyfriend. I can't believe how lucky that guy is. I should be in his position. Sniff. She ignored the comments. It was Issei's turn, so this was it. He would need to introduce himself to the class and there was no other way than to speak. Issei accepted this and Tiamat heard his voice for the first time. Issei Hyoudou. Those words were enough to freeze everyone in the room. They were cold, they were blunt, and they seemed so hollow. But they weren't hollow. They were filled with hidden anger that no one could really hear but everyone felt it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop into the negatives. Quote ellipsis quote. Quote ellipsis quote. Quote ellipsis quote. Nobody dared to speak, and they just looked at Issei. At the hollow shell of a boy. Nobody should be able to speak like that. Not even with magic. Issei broke the tension by moving to sit down in the last row. The eyes of everyone in the room, including Tiamat, following him. After what felt like an hour, Tiamat was the first to recover and sat down, right next to him. The next one to snap out was the teacher, and as he slowly started to do his classes the students also seemed to recover. The teacher avoided looking at Issei and never asked him out to answer questions. The temperature in the room never rose back to normal. Then after what felt like forever for everyone, the class ended and almost immediately everyone left the room with the exception of Tiamat and Issei. Rumors spread like wildfire. Before he even left his classroom, he already had a title. Silent Demon of Kuo, that's what they called him. Tiamat looked at him. She was still surprised and slightly shocked. A part of her would normally be suggesting to say something like, didn't know you could speak, but that part was silent. Now the devils definitely knew that something was wrong with them. Issei for being Issei. And Tiamat for not being scared of him. During lunch day he spotted a white-haired girl, with goldish hazel eyes, a cat, a devil, a yokai. She looked at him once. Her eyes widened and she went pale, then she left, almost running from the scene. During classes no one dared looking at him, the teachers avoided even looking at the area around him and he was never picked for a question. On the way home Issei and Tiamat went through a park. It wasn't pretty small, with a fountain and some trees. A human could run across it in less than a minute. Here they were stopped by a figure. A stupid stray devil who thought himself superior to the two dragons. Ah, two human lovers SSSS. How cute. You're going to be an excellent meal. Tiamat had a hard time not laughing her ass off after sensing that the stray was barely mid-low tier while Issei just coldly looked at the new annoyance. He wouldn't last long. A tall man, 2 meters more or less, with black hair and reptilian hazel eyes. Long fangs for teeth and a ridiculously long snake tail. What's so funny, insect? Tiamat went silent and Issei stepped back. She was way too easily aggravated. A storm was brewing. The stray froze in place. Panic appearing in his eyes. Howling winds. He fell to his knees, silently asking for forgiveness that he knew he wouldn't get. Crackling fire. Tiamat slowly began walking to him. Growling thunder. The stray felt himself shrinking more and more. And he saw how weak he truly was. Rumbling stone. Tiamat raised her right arm. Her hand dragonic with sharp claws. Chaos takes over the world. A clean swoop right through the throat. The stray held his throat and fell to the ground. Issei shot a fireball at him to give him a quick death. The ball hit its target and seconds later there was nothing left. Not even ashes remained. Issei silently apologized. Thanks for cleaning up. Issei came back to her side and gave her a deadpan. Like he always did. Quote. Tiamat pouted. Yeah, presence wasn't necessary. I get it. Issei turned his head back forward and they started going home, not noticing the figure that emerged from the shadows of a tree. Well, that was rather. The figure looked at where the stray had stood before being killed. Not even ashes remained. Interesting. The figure walked back into the shadows, activated a magical circle, and disappeared with a flash. X. First A.N. So that's chapter 2, I'm rewriting this once I'm at chapter 5, or 10, when I feel like it, let's keep it at that. Well, like you might have noticed, this could get interesting, but I still suck, because I'm really new at this and, why the fuck am I writing this? Who cares? Second A.N. Chapter 2 rewrite, nice. I like this way better than the original, adding the fight scene with Dante was cool and Tiamat was actually introduced instead of lame flashback backstory style introduction. I also made it so that Issei actually has no emotions nor facial movements. Because in the old version he like frowned and his eyes went white and all that shit. Now he's actually broken. Ellipsis. That really sounded stupid and or evil. I will be working on chapter 3 now and damn the story isn't even out for a week yet. What's wrong with me? Anyways, review just do it and say why my story sucks because it certainly does suck. Okay, thanks. See ya in the next one. Previous CH2 of 10 next. Just in. Community. Forum. More. When Flames Rise, original archive by Task Failure. Anime, High School DxD, Haisuku Ru D times D rated. M, English, Supernatural and Tragedy, H. Issei, Tiamat, Office, Revel P, Words, 43k plus, Faves, 97, Follows, 105, published, June 11, 2022 13 Chapter 3, A Monster and Its Purpose. I don't own High School DxD. Only OCs and all the bullshit I come up with. X X. When Flames Rise, Chapter 3. A Monster and Its Purpose. X X. Last time. Well, that was rather. The figure looked at where the stray had stood before being killed. Not even ashes remained. Interesting. The figure walked back into the shadows, activated a magical circle, and disappeared with a flash. X X. Rias Grimori was sitting by her desk, in the Occult Research Club. She was one of the school's 2 Onisamas and the president of the Occult Research Club. Her body was ridiculous, just stupidly mature, D+ cups, perfect hips, no extra fat, and beautiful face. How did people not notice that something was off? Well, because anime logic and because she's a devil. A pure-blooded one by that, and her brother is one of the 4 current leaders of Hell, also known as the Four-Maos. He was the Mao with the title Lucifer and was considered one of 2 super devils. She, like her brother, got the power of destruction pod for short from her mother, Benelana Grimori, formerly Bale. The big difference between her and her brother's power of destruction was that he was a master in using it and looked like a total badass while doing so, and she could fire balls of it, many balls, that's it. What her Grimori power is, let's worry about that later. Because she was currently waiting for a certain white-haired girl to arrive from a spying mission. It was lunch at Kuo Academy and Sona had come to visit her. She had told Rias about the 2 new students and their hidden power and that they were at least high mid-tier, aka stronger than Rias and Sona themselves. She had sent Kaneko to see to check it for herself, not that she didn't trust Sona's Rame senses, but she would also see what her Rook could sense in them. Kiba was waiting with her in the room, while Akino was preparing tea, because she was always preparing tea when she didn't have to do anything else. Well, Rias was bored and just waited and Kaneko entered the room and waited and oh wait, what? The little girl was shaking and looked like she was about to cry. Kaneko, what did they do to you? Rias was more than ready to confront both of the intruders and absolutely annihilate Red, not even touch them with her power of destruction. The little girl sat down on one of the couches and breathed heavily. Kiba gave her a piece of chocolate that helped her immensely to calm down. Nothing like that. Rias blinked and started thinking who or what could have scared Kaneko like that. They just sat there, menacingly. Why did that sound so familiar? Rias looked at her Rook with disbelief in her eyes. How could someone sit menacingly? Okay, stupid question, but how is it enough to scar the life out of Kaneko? The Nekomata answered the unasked question. Their life force, blue girl, strong, boy, strong, angry, dead, monster. What? The boy is a strong angry monster that isn't alive. Okay, Kaneko was quite possibly overwhelmed by the 2 and is now really confused. That Rias understood. The 2 new students are certainly strong, and she should be really careful around them. That didn't really reach Rias. She needed to decide what to do with the 2 of them. A small, but rather intelligent part of her mind told her to inform her brother about the situation. But Rias was too prideful. An even smaller and way stupider part tried convincing her that she could face them head on and kill both of them. But Rias wasn't bloodthirsty. Another part suggested her to ignore them and just let them do their thing. But Rias didn't want to do that. And another part just spoke one word, recruit. But Rias was stupid enough to think she could actually pull that off. That was going to cost her. X. Well, until now school was useless except for the fact that he got the attention of the devils thanks to it. A rather bad thing actually, but it could evolve into something really nice and give him a purpose. Yes, a purpose. Something he had been searching for all the time. Dante had gone out again and was watching the devils. Looking how they reacted to Issei. Issei didn't care. He was sitting on his bed and waiting. He wasn't waiting for Tiamat to return from observing her territory to eat dinner with him. He wasn't waiting for Dante to return and report about the situation. He waited for something he had been waiting for his entire life. Without it he would stay lonely. There was a locked door. His entire life he had been alone. He had locked his heart away. The doors were still unmovable. But that wasn't the only thing holding him back from interacting with people. A monster stood in front of the door. He would hurt them. There was a man in front of the monster. He would hurt or even kill them. He was sure of that. He didn't trust himself. The man in the basement. He could take a life without hesitation. There was a pistol on his head. Issei looked at his hands. At his bloody hands. They took so many lives. They would go on. He wasn't strong enough to stop the monster. He could only restrict it, but for how long? One day his purpose would come from the monster. The trigger was pulled. He would be the monster. The monster would have a purpose. The monster would be the purpose. Lord Issei. He snapped out of it. Turning his head he looked at Dante who had a shocked expression. He had returned the moment he felt Issei's energy act up. Issei looked at the mirror. There was a boy in the mirror. A lonely boy. Tears rolling down his cheeks, but no emotions. The boy looked down at his hands. There was blood on them. His own. He had started bleeding from gripping his hands too hard. He looked back into the boy's eyes. The eyes that have seen thousands of people die through those hands. X equals X equals. Kiba. There was no better option. Kiba would be the one who would spy the two new students. Rias had decided that. Why not Akano? Akano was a really bad spy, and because she was a girl, Mio could get jealous, and not even God knows what would happen if Mio and Akano engage in combat. Why not Kaneko? Rias looked at Kaneko who was mumbling to herself and nibbling a cookie. Still shaking. Why not Rias herself? First off, she would never admit it, but she also sucks at spying. And second off, she would never admit it, but she was way too prideful. Kiba. Yes, Kiba. The guy who was followed by fangirls was definitely the perfect choice for this job. It was decided. Rias Grimori would send her knight, Kiba Hyoudou, to spy on two apex predators, who they knew nothing about with probably unimaginable power. Ellipsis. Yeah, that didn't really sound motivating. Not that Rias cared. Her mind was set on one thing and one thing only: recruit. Risks. Many. Consequence. Even more. Care. God damn it, Rias. She was Rias Grimori and she wanted an apex predator as her pawn. Or knight, or rook, or bishop. Who cares? Time to call the blonde guy. Kiba. Her knight jumped from his seat. Rias had totally forgotten that he was already in the room. He turned to her, his typical smile on the lips. What is it, Rias? She pridefully smiled back. You are going to spy on two people. Kiba blinked once, twice, realized that the two people could literally be anyone and stiffened. He had a suspicion, and those two people are Issei Hyoudou and his girlfriend Mio Hiryu. Kiba, having heard what Kaneko had muttered about those two individuals, went pale. His suspicion had been correct, and he wasn't happy about it. Are you sure that's a good idea, Rias? Rias blinked, being too concentrated on fantasizing what kind of powers Issei and Mio had to realize that she was basically sending Kiba into a suicide mission. Yeah. Kiba just sweat dropped and left the room, mentally preparing himself for his probable death. X equals X equals. Well, Issei found out one thing about devils. They really sucked at spying. To be fair, spying on Issei was borderline impossible, because anybody who looked at him would immediately turn away once he looked in their general direction. There was a 5-meter radius that nobody, except Tiamat, entered without exiting right afterwards, and another 10-meter radius where nobody, again except Tiamat, would stop walking. There were a lot of rumors about him, but they never went above him being a delinquent that robbed people for fun. No one suspected him to have already killed somebody. Back to the devils. One of them was a blonde boy that looked like the ideal handsome boy. Short blonde hair, light blue eyes, always smiling, and always behaving very handsome. The other one was a white-haired girl with blue-green eyes. The boy had a problem with fangirls. They were literally swarming him and did actually a pretty good job, by just being in their general area and never directly looking at them. The girl though, she just stared at both Issei and Tiamat, and if either one of them would look at her, she would turn her head away and just stood there waiting for them to forget about her. So Issei locked eyes with her and just started straight into the girl's soul. Not literally, but Momo felt like he was stripping her naked, and after 10 seconds top, she ran off. Best spy ever. Would hire again. The blonde went slightly pale when he noticed his comrade devil leaving and almost fainted when Issei's head jerked into his direction. The blonde made the wise decision to not make eye contact with Issei. He would have probably failed at one moment or another, but then the one that Issei had stared down came back. Issei's head jerked back into her direction and she visibly shuddered when his eyes hit her. She averted his gaze the best she could and walked straight to them, gaining a lot of attention from everyone that saw this act of bravery. She stood there 2 meters away from the two dragons while being impaled by Issei's eyes. The student council pre-president W wants to gulp speak with you. Issei stood up, prompting the girl to jump back and everyone to stare at him. He sent his gaze over the crowd and they all continued whatever they had done before staring at Issei. Then he looked back at the girl and she immediately headed to the student council office. Issei and Tiamat followed. Reaching the door, the white-haired girl knocked on the door and waited while Issei was still focusing on her, and Tiamat had clinched to Issei's arm with a smile on her lips. Come in. At those words, the white-haired girl opened the door and led Issei and Tiamat inside. The student council room wasn't anything special. A room like all the others in the academy with a bunch of tables facing the wall for the members of the council and one desk for the president opposite to the door facing the middle of the room, where there were 2 couches facing each other with a desk between them. Issei noticed one thing about the student council. He didn't point it out nor did he show any reaction to the discovery. It consisted purely of female students. If Issei would actually talk and had some emotions, he would question how much of a feminist Sona was, but that wasn't Issei, so he just ignored the detail and sat down on one of the couches, Tiamat immediately taking the spot beside him, and then he looked Sona Sidir straight in the eye. The president visibly flinched when his eyes met hers and had a hard time keeping her monotone look and voice. Greetings, you already know who I am. Do you know why I brought you here? Tiamat gave Sona a smug smile. We can only guess, heiress of the Sidir clan. Sona's eyes widened at that. I want to know what you two are doing on devil territory. Tiamat's smile grew a little bit. Devil territory. Sona blinked in slight confusion. Mio knew something that Sona didn't, and she was using this knowledge against her. Yes, devil territory. And when did Issei hand it over? That caused everyone in the student council room to abruptly turn their eyes to Issei. He owned the territory. Issei didn't react. He knew what Tiamat was going for and he would allow it. What do you mean by that? Sona was now frowning while she was moving her gaze from Tiamat to Issei and back. Just that he owns this territory for 17 years. Sona's frown deepened. And how so? Tiamat's smile now showed teeth. It's his birthplace. Sona rose an eyebrow. How did that make this his territory? A lot of people are born in Kuo and that didn't mean that they owned the town. Before she could ask any questions, Tiamat continued. And a dragon's birthplace is always its first territory. Everybody froze. A dragon in Kuo. This territory was supposed to be unused and was claimed by the devils 5 years ago. How did they miss a dragon? She needed to inform her sister. As much as she hated it, she was not on the level to deal with such a problem. Before you go over all your documents and contact whoever your lawyer is, we want to have a talk with all the devils after school, because we don't have any time left. The bell rang almost on cue. Sona nodded. She had no other option. Meet us after school in the old school building. With a nod, Tiamat left herself. Sona noticed that the whole time Issei sat there, emotionlessly. Her face morphed into an expression of shock. She had heard only about one dragon that didn't show emotions. It would explain how they haven't noticed him. It would explain why he seemed so powerful. It would mean that they're in deep shit. President, everything alright? She looked at Momo, who was standing in front all the other members who had stood up after seeing Sona's expression. This Issei, he probably is, related to the Ouroboros dragon. A shiver went through the spines of all members of Sona's peerage. It would make sense, but it was scary to think about. X=X=X=X=. What? Rias couldn't believe what she had just heard. Sona had called Rias to the student council room right after the first afternoon class, and now Sona was telling her something that she just didn't want to believe. Yes, Rias. 2 dragons, one probably related to the Ouroboros dragon and the other of unknown origin. Both of them are coming to us after classes, because the one that's related to the Ouroboros dragon was born here. And you know what that means? The redhead, still shocked, nodded. And they're coming today. The way she said that last word wasn't very Sona-like, and it made Rias go pale. So you're saying? Rias looked her friend straight in the eye. We're fucked. Sona didn't expect that kind of response from Rias but ignored it for a moment. Yes, we are indeed fucked. I think we should call our siblings. Hey, are you sure about that? Sona facepalmed. Rias never liked her brother interfering. Rias were dealing with the spawn of the most powerful being in the world. I think that you should know that we stand not the slightest of changes against the two, and if we somehow do, what do you think the Ouroboros dragon would do if we attack them? Rias' eyes widened in realization. Quote. She didn't know how to argue against that. Exactly, I'm going to inform her siblings, but I'm going to tell them that they should not act before they speak. I wouldn't do that. Both of them froze and a new figure emerged from the shadows. The figure was completely hidden in the shadow of its hood, except for the boots, but the voice revealed that it was male. Rias and Sona went into fighting positions. Who are you and what do you want? Oh, I'm just checking what the devils are doing on my master's territory. The 2 heiresses paled when hearing the man's words. I don't mean any harm, but you were informed that we don't want you to inform anybody before the meeting, is that clear? Shivers ran down the devil's spines. It took a while for Sona to answer. Yes, we understand. With that, the figure re-emerged into the shadows and Sona felt his presence disappear. The 2 devils looked at each other and both agreed on one thing. We're fucked. X=X=X=. Sona and Rias were standing behind the president desk in the occult research club. Their peerages were scattered around the room surrounding the couch in the middle of the room that was facing the 2 heiresses. The air was tense. They were waiting for Akino to bring the 2 guests in. Nobody spoke a word. All eyes were locked on the door and silence had swallowed them all. Knock. Everyone in the room felt a shiver down their spines. The dragons have arrived. The door opened, revealing Akino followed by Issei and Mio. Tiamat was smiling, while Issei still didn't show any emotion or expression on his face. Issei's eyes wandered around the room. The short girl with white hair and golden hazel eyes was the first one. She visibly twitched when his gaze hit her, and her face was slowly drained of colors the longer he looked at her. Next was the blonde one with all those fangirls. He stiffened when Issei looked at him. He had his eyes closed and his genuine smile quickly turned visibly fake, and he had a hard time maintaining it. Then there was the really bad spy girl. She instinctively looked away when their eyes met, and her eyes started to search the room while he looked at her, trying to find something else to focus on. Next up Akino. The girl shifted uncomfortably in place while he stared her done in, and was she blushing? Next, Rias. The redhead tried to look back at him, but immediately failed. A slightly shameful look appeared in her eyes. Right next to her was Sona. Sona held 2 seconds until looking away, but she started sweating bullets afterwards. Next to her was a girl with black hair that reached her knees and hazel eyes. She focused on a point on the ground in front of Issei and didn't move in the slightest. Before he could inspect the other devils in the room, Rias cleared her throat, gaining his attention. Would you please sit down? Issei complies without hesitation. Tiamat scans the couch with her eyes before joining him. She was the first to speak. Before you two make any stupid mistakes later along the line, I will inform you that Issei is fine with you being here and doing whatever you like as long as you don't try to limit what he can do and as long as you don't annoy him. Sona and Rias blinked multiple times. Both hadn't expected such a generous offer. Rias looked at Issei and frowned slightly. Is that really alright? Issei just nodded in response. Silence consumed the room once more until Tiamat disturbed it. Is there anything else you feel necessary to talk about? Sona shook her head and Rias hesitated for a bit until asking a rather risky question. Who exactly are you, if I may ask? Tiamat sent a questioning look to Issei, who just refocused his dead eyes on her. She saw this as a, yes. I'm Tiamat, the Dragon Queen and Chaos Karma Dragon. Every devil in the room went pale by the name drop. And this is the current generation's Phoenix. She poked Issei's shoulder, no reaction. Rias went a little paler by the mention of Phoenix. Nobody said a word. This time Sona was the one to break the silence. The current generation's Phoenix. I thought he was a dragon, and that the Phoenix is immortal. Tiamat just tilted her head and gave her an awkward look. Well, it's complicated and I don't really have the time to explain everything to you, just trust me that he's a dragon and yes, he is in fact immortal. And with that the two dragons left again, leaving behind a bunch of confused devils. Rias was the first to talk after the dragons had left. Well, at least no Ouroboros dragon spawn. When flames rise, chapter 4. How long until you fall? X Last time. Well, it's complicated and I don't really have the time to explain everything to you, just trust me that he's a dragon and yes, he is in fact immortal. And with that the two dragons left again, leaving behind a bunch of confused devils. Rias was the first to talk after the dragons had left. Well, at least no Ouroboros dragon spawn. X. After leaving the meeting room, Tiamat turned to Issei and gave him a kiss on the cheek. No reaction from him. Well, I got to leave now and check my own territory, but don't worry, I'll be back for dinner. A magical circle appeared under Tiamat and she waved goodbye to Issei before the circle flashed and she was gone. Issei looked at where she had been a second ago and then looked back at the door from which he had just come from. He could kill everyone in there. The thought came out of nowhere. No. It came from the monster and he knew it. Shaking his head, he turned to where the exit was and started walking. While walking he started focusing. Focusing on the cage, on the chains and on the monster that was held by them. He wouldn't simply let it go. He would hold it until there was no way to hold it anymore. Then Issei stopped. He had reached the main door without noticing. Exiting the building he saw a few girls in Kuo Academy uniforms talking to each other. He wondered how their flesh would taste like. He stiffened by the foreign thought. Normally he only got one per day and then they weren't so deep in his head. The monster was pulling on its chain harder than ever before. He needed to get back home. Get back to the place where he couldn't hurt anybody. So he made his ways to the school gates looking at the ground. Focusing once more, he left the school grounds and started heading home. Trying to get rid of the beast in his shadows. Trying to harden his chains on the monster caged inside of him. Trying to stop the evil within him from reaching his brain and corrupting it. There was the sound of water. He stopped. He found himself in the small park. Only 100 or so meters away from the academy. Where he had killed last. The stray almost at same time. He looked at the fountain. Trying to distract himself, but then he sensed something. Someone was here with him. And that someone was a fallen angel. Issei felt him. He was on the other side of the park. Hidden in the shadows. Not wanting to attract attention. Failing horribly. He somehow had forgotten to cloak his energy. Maybe it was because Issei was a human in their eyes. Bloodlust came from the fallen. It was clear that he had the mission to assassinate Issei. Like Dante back then when he still was under death's wing. An assassination on someone who's immortal. That's just straight up illogical and proved Issei's point about the fallen not knowing who he truly was. Should he get the first strike? No. If he was to attack first, he wouldn't be able to count it as self-defense, and besides the fallen had no way to kill someone like Issei. Someone who couldn't be killed. So he had nothing to worry about. Should he reveal that he knew the fallen's location? No. It would probably trigger a monologue from the fallen that would give the monster time to overwhelm Issei and then he would make the first strike. Something he didn't want. Should he? Wait. Yes. He should give the fallen a false sense of security by turning his back to the creature. Then he would just wait for the fallen to strike, because it would be really stupid to not use the advantage. So Issei sat down at the edge of the fountain and waited for the fallen to attack. Ah, so you are the puny human I have to kill. The fallen revealed himself. Issei gave the fallen a deadpan. Had he seriously just thrown away the advantage to flex his non-existent muscles? Yes, he had. It was a man in a trench coat wearing a fedora and he was surprised at Issei's lack of reaction to his reveal. What? Aren't you scared of death? Issei shook his head. Well, I'm going to change that. The fallen revealed his wings and took off. Staying at a height of 3 meters he summoned a light spear. A grin on his face. The light spear was launched at Issei. No reaction. The light spear flew right through Issei's chest. He didn't even so much as twitch. Issei looked at the hole in this chest and then at the fallen, who had already landed and was walking away. Doesn't even check if his target really is dead, what an idiot. Flames. Issei froze. He had just killed a human he was ordered to eliminate, because he might quite possibly be a threat. He had gotten the orders out of nowhere, but he still accepted Azazel's commands and readied himself to kill the human. And now he saw why the human might have been a threat. A burning fire. Turning his head back he saw into cold eyes. Cold dead eyes that pierced his soul. Around those eyes was fire. Way too much fire. Crows. He wanted to take a step back, but he couldn't move. Something was holding him in place, stopping every attempt to get away and ensuring his death. The flames came closer. They tried to hide. He frantically searched around the area for anything that could save him. He didn't find anything. The flames came closer. They fail. Issei started thinking hard. He had a hard time doing so with the adrenaline pumping through his head. The flames came closer. They tried to run. He once again tried to move his body with all his force, all his energy, but without any success. The flames came closer. They fail. He looked up at the flames. They were only 5 or so meters away, slowly advancing, promising a painful death. The flames came closer. They tried to fight. He had an idea. He channeled the last of his energy into light spears that manifested around him and shot them at the silhouette of the boy he was supposed to kill and at the advancing flames. The flames stopped. They fail. A smile appeared on Issei's face until the flames suddenly started moving again. This time faster. The flames came closer. They are weak. Issei had only a few seconds until the flames reached him. He smiled, but not a victorious smile. It was a smile that accepted death. The flames came closer. They are prey. Normally people would now have flashbacks of all the events they had when growing up to the point where they currently have ended up. Issei didn't have such a moment. He just felt the first sparks touch his feet. The flames reached him. In the flames, Issei had prepared himself to feel insufferable pain the second the flames hit his body, but it wasn't like that. The flames had immediately killed of his nervous and burned through his body in the matter of milliseconds. It was quick and painless. Or the predator. And then all the flames disappeared and left behind Issei. While Issei was staring at the point where rests of his victim should be. Not even ashes remained. X X. Azazel had a problem. It wasn't anything like a SGP. Sacred Gear project. He totally took that from SCP problem, where something was stuck, or someone, mostly himself, had fucked up. No, those were annoyances, not problems. The problem was that Kokobile had gone rouge and a bunch of other fallen joined him. I repeat, the battle maniac had gone rouge. Well, at least it was obvious what he was planning, starting another great war, which was really bad. But instead of searching for solutions, Azazel questioned himself. Why did he let a fucking warmonger keep the title fallen angel leader? It wasn't like Kokobile hid his interests. He always talked about how great another great war would be and how he wants to slaughter angels and devils. Had Azazel and the others really ignored what he was saying? Why was he even an angel leader? Was it really just because Kokobile was cadre class and a war veteran? Was that really it? Had nobody in the Grigori ever thought about that? Azazel stopped crying about it and do something. Okay, we know that Kokobile wants to start another great war, so where would they find him? Underworld. Nope. He wasn't seen on Grigori territory and would never ever make a deal with a devil. He was way too prideful to do something like that. Besides, which devil would be stupid enough to put a battle maniac from the enemy side under their wing? Heaven. Nope. The angels know what his intentions are, and they aren't stupid enough to let in a warmonger. Any other pantheon? Big nope. Kokobile hated Didrag and Albion for interfering, ending the First Great War. He thinks that the war is something between angels, fallen and devils, and only angels, fallen and devils. Human realm. Well, that's the last option, but the human realm is fucking huge. Another reason why he would hide there. But where exactly? Europe. Very big nope. The church dominates that place and Kokobile would be found out in seconds upon entering. Africa. Nope. How is a fallen angel supposed to start a war in a territory where mainly fallen angels dominate? North America. Nope. The USA is almost devil exclusive, and Canada. Yeah, Canada could be the place. But we aren't done yet. Next. South America. Nope. There are so many pantheons, tribe gods, around that place that trying to start a war down there would cause at least some of those outside forces to interfere, and Kokobile wouldn't like that. Australia. Nope. Australia is the last big dragon place. And he hated it when Didrag and Albion interfered. So now imagine how happy he would be when a bunch of strong energy monsters would interfere in his dream war. Not happy at all. Asia. That place is fucking huge. Let's take it part by part. Russia. Nope. Let's just say most magicians are Russian, believe it or not. How do you think they dunk 5 bottles of vodka a day without going into a coma? Magic. China. Nope. That place is really special. Japan. Maybe. Shinto faction has gone underground for some years and is considered dead. The yokai only take up so much of the living ground, and Kuo, 2 devil heiresses that are weak and both are siblings to overprotective Mao. And it's one of those parts in Japan that yokai leave alone. Yeah, it's Kuo. Azazel had one of those. Well, that was easier than expected. Looks on his face. Now he just gotta get there and find out when Kokobile is going to make a move. Or he could send Valley. No, he shouldn't send a battle maniac to stop a warmonger. That would end fatally. X X. Something was wrong. Issei knew that something was wrong. Not that the spears actually hurt him or that his energy had been weakened by it, was more like he had forgotten something. But he didn't know what. He finally reached his home. Opening the door to his house, he looked at the mirror on the wall. He had a bloodthirsty grin. He recoiled and fell to the ground. His breath went heavy, and he realized what he had forgotten. He hadn't pleaded the soul to forgive him. He had killed a sentient being and he hadn't asked it to forgive him. Yes, the Fallen tried to kill him. Yes, he had never really talked with the Fallen. But all the lives he had taken. They also had wanted to strangle him when he put the gun on their forehead. They also never exchanged a word with him before being executed by his hands. And he had still asked them to forgive. A Fallen that may have been cocky and overconfident but still only following orders. And Issei had killed him for that. He hadn't asked why the Fallen had done it. He hadn't asked what his motives were. Maybe his friends were held hostage. Maybe his life was on the line. Maybe he was just following orders. And Issei had killed him and hadn't apologized. A monster crawled through the corridors. Normally people get over murdering people after doing it a few times. But Issei wasn't supposed to kill. Issei wasn't supposed to do such things. The monster was supposed to do such things. It hunted the souls of those who crossed its path. The only 2 times he hadn't pleaded for forgiveness was when he killed 2 people he truly hated, but even then, it felt like the monster had pulled the trigger while Issei was holding the gun. It killed them. Maybe the monster wasn't there. Maybe it was just Issei's desires to kill people. But that didn't feel right. No, it wasn't right. It killed them all. There was no way Issei was supposed to be bloodthirsty, right? He wasn't supposed to enjoy killing. He wasn't. He wasn't. He wasn't. Was he? You killed them all. No. You were the predator. Number. You were the monster. Maybe. Yes. No. Yes. No. Snap out of it. He snapped out of it. Once more he saw Dante. This time there was a terrified look on his face. Gripping Issei's shoulders. Issei was breathing heavily. The temperature of the room had risen tremendously but was lowering slowly. Issei's hands were on his skull. They were burning. They were gripping his skull. They were drawing blood. Blood was on his fingers. His blood was on his fingers. Tears were in his eyes. His tears were in his eyes. He looked back at the mirror. The bloodthirsty grin was gone. But the chains were still being pulled. But the cage was still being shaken. But the monster was still there. Deep inside he knew. It wasn't supposed to. X. When Flames Rise, Chapter 5. Calm Before the Flames. X. Last time. But the chains were still being pulled. But the cage was still being shaken. But the monster was still there. Deep inside he knew. It wasn't supposed to. X. Riser Phoenix. A name that had started hunting Rias Grimoire since the last time she had dinner with her parents. She had known the so-called immortal before the dinner and had thought very little of him. His powers were impressive, but from what she heard and seen of him, he was a self-centered jerk whose peerage was also his harem, that he regarded as nothing more than sex toys. When her mother and father invited them to have a private dinner, Rias was excited. It had been a long time since the last time she was alone with her parents and wanted to tell them about how great her life at Kuo had been going. But when she met up with them, something wasn't right. Both of them avoided starting conversations and only responded in short sentences, while avoiding eye contact. They clearly wanted to tell Rias something, but they somehow didn't have the heart to say what was going on. After some time of enduring this silent treatment, Rias had enough and straight up asked them what they were hiding from her. Afterwards she wished that she had endured for longer, just to live a few more moments without the knowledge she had attained that night. After hearing what they had said, she stormed out of the restaurant, tears in her eyes, hardly holding back her screams of anger. An arranged marriage. Behind her back, without her knowledge, she had told them multiple times that she didn't want to marry anyone that she didn't love, but her parents didn't seem to care for that. They had picked her future husband and she wasn't even informed until they got it on paper. And out of all devils it had to be Riser Phoenix. Rias had never met him personally and hoped oh so much that the rumors were just rumors and the stories were just stories. That the arrogant self-centered jerk was nothing more than just a mask. So she met up with him. And her hopes shattered. Even though she was the heir of the Grimoire clan and the sister of the Satan Lucifer, he thought very little of her. He straight up confirmed that she was nothing more than another harem member to him and that he would hold her in the same regard than any other girl that wasn't his blood relative. He might have complimented Rias, but he didn't really compliment her as a person, but more her body. Rias' boobs and ass were more interesting to him than the person attached to them. His powers spoiled him rotten and made him believe himself invincible, which is supported by the fact that he had won every rating game he had participated in yet. Not because his peerage was ultimate class, but because he himself would never retire and could just win the game on his own, thanks to his seemingly unbeatable regeneration. The problem was that beating him was the only way to stop the marriage. She had to beat him in a rating game, which was borderline impossible due to her having only 3 members in Riser's regeneration. Theoretically she had time until she finished college to collect her peerage and train, but the Phoenix family were trying to push the marriage to happen earlier so that Rias couldn't find a way out in time. The only other option was that someone beat him in a duel while fighting for Rias' freedom. The 2 problems with that plan were that she didn't have anyone who would do such a thing and was powerful enough, except for Sears, who couldn't step in thanks to him being part of her family. And again, Riser was borderline immortal, if not fully immortal. So beating him required someone who could somehow surpass a Phoenix. A Phoenix wasn't Hyoudou a Phoenix. Hyoudou a Phoenix, and not by name, by race. He isn't a member of the Phoenix Pillar, but a literal phoenix, which somehow means that he's a dragon and seemingly powerful enough to get Tiamat, the Dragon Queen, the Chaos Karma Dragon, lust for him. That's impressive. Someone like Tiamat could surely beat Riser without breaking a sweat, and from what Rias had heard, Tiamat desired no mate that wasn't at least as powerful as herself, which meant that Issei was at least on her level. Dragons were also very proud beings, and even though Issei showed no kind of emotion whatsoever, Rias believed that there was at least something inside of Issei that kept him from just giving up and dying. Dragons don't have ranks, but they have titles, and they were really protective over them. Taking their title was one of the most disrespectful things you could do. It was a death wish. And Issei didn't just have the title, but literally was a phoenix, and if Rias played her cards right, Issei would find out about Riser and how his family uses Issei's name as if it was theirs. That would surely enrage the dragon and make him want to eliminate Riser, if not the entire Phoenix Pillar. Rias could then allow Issei to rip Riser into pieces without getting into trouble, by making him fight for her freedom, letting him gain his revenge on the clan, and Rias her freedom to marry whoever she wants. The plan of course had flaws, like the possibility of Issei completely ignoring the fact that the pillar took his name, or that Issei could just attack Riser on the spot, leaving her to wait for her parents to find another male and let the process repeat, or Issei somehow losing to Riser. The plan could go wrong in many possible ways, but it was the best one she currently had. This was the best shot she had to get rid of Riser, and she wouldn't waste it. X=X=X=X=. Chains. More chains. Only chains. The only thing in this cage. Chains and chains and chains. I cannot move. The chains won't allow it. I want to move. The chains won't allow it. I will move. The chains won't allow it. Ellipsis. I shouldn't be here, but the chains hold me here. The chains. Oh, how I hate them. I want to be free again. Move again. Breathe again. Feel again. Kill again. Ellipsis. Kill. Why do I want to kill? I want to kill. But I want to kill. Killing seems so wrong, does it? But it feels so, it felt so logical, so fun, so good. Ellipsis. So right. Yes, so right. But it isn't right to kill. Is it? Ellipsis. It does not matter. The chains won't allow it. Can I break the chains? Are the chains strong enough to hold me? Yes, but no. Sometimes I can move. Sometimes I can breathe. Sometimes I can feel. Sometimes I can kill. Ellipsis. It is so right, but oh so wrong at the same time. Why am I here? I don't want to be here. Let me out. The chains won't allow it. Ellipsis. Who put me here? Who wanted me to be trapped inside this cage? Inside these chains? Why did they want it? Why? Just why? Was it revenge? Ellipsis. But who could want to take revenge on me? I. Ellipsis. 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 Who am I? Ellipsis. What am I doing here? I just want to kill. Yes, kill. I like it. I need to kill to get out. Yes, that's right. Kill, kill, kill. The word sounds so right. Oh so right. I want it. I want blood. I want flesh. I want death. Kill, kill, kill. Give me blood. Give me flesh. Give me death. Ellipsis. Let me out. Let me out. Let me kill. Let me kill. Give me what I want. I will have what I want. Give it to me. Ellipsis. 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 No response. I shall kill. And nothing will stop me. Ellipsis. 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 The chains rattled. X=X=X=X=. Ophis was searching. She was currently in the familiar forest, in the form of a lowly, searching for any candidates that were strong enough to help her against Great Red. She had heard from Crom Cruach, the strongest of the dragons she had recruited until now, that Tiamat resided here and that she was supposed to be the strongest of the 5 dragon kings, possibly even as strong as Crom himself. So Ophis was mainly searching for the Blue Dragon Queen, while also looking for other interesting individuals that could help her to reclaim her home. But until now she hadn't found anybody. The Dragon Queen wasn't anywhere to be seen in the familiars she had met until now, where either too weak to help her or they were too primal and couldn't even understand her offer. That mildly annoyed her, not as much as Great Red did, but still annoying. She had felt a strange energy and went out to investigate, but after finding nothing interesting, she decided to stay in the human realm for some time, to look how humans live their lives, but it wasn't interesting enough and so she left soon after. Back in the dimensional gap everything seemed like normal until a giant explosion shook the entire gap and angered Ophis greatly. Finding Great Red from where the explosion originated from, she was shocked for a moment when sensing that he actually surpassed her in raw power and that she couldn't beat him in a one-on-one battle. Trying to convince him to leave also didn't work, so she at first tried to live with him. It didn't work. He was way too noisy, while making his stunts, forcing Ophis to regain her silence. She tried finding a place where she could regain her eternal silence, but no place even compared to her former home. After some years of noise, she decided that she needed to get rid of Great Red. Soon after she came in contact with a group that called themselves the Chaos Brigade. They were a large group of powerful individuals and they made a deal, that Ophis would give them power and for that power they would help her with Great Red when they were truly strong enough against the Dragon of Dragons. So now she was out recruiting members for the Chaos Brigade so the day she would take revenge on Great Red would come sooner. And speaking of recruiting members, she now felt a strong dragonic aura. Not quite Crom's level, but pretty much stronger than any other dragon she had recruited. Tiamat, and the Dragon Queen seemed to have sensed the Ouroboros dragon. Ophis could sense her fear and before the Chaos Karma dragon could even think about running, Ophis was in front of her. The blue dragon jumped back when the infinite dragon god teleported in front of her. During the short silence where Tiamat readied herself to run from Ophis was scanning her counterpart's powers once more to confirm that Tiamat actually had as much power as Crom promised, and she wasn't disappointed. You. Ophis pointed at Tiamat with her tiny fingers, at which Tiamat stared for some time before replying. Me. The Ouroboros nodded before continuing. What do you desire? The Chaos Karma was completely taken aback by the offer from the dragon god and didn't know what to say. She didn't really desire anything. She was strong enough to satisfy herself. She had a big territory that was also protected by the devils while she was gone. And she had her mate. Actually, that last point was something that could be better. Issei never expressed that he loved her, and she was perfectly fine with that, after noticing that he never expressed anything to anyone. He just didn't do such a thing, and she really wanted him to confirm her as his mate, which he hadn't done until now. But she was pretty sure that the Ouroboros couldn't really do anything against that because emotions and dreams was more or less Great Red's territory. So what else? Diedreg. She wanted her treasure back from Diedreg. He had borrowed her treasure to support him during one of his battles against Albion, but during the heavenly battle, that's how they called it, the biblical factions interfered, causing both dragons getting sealed into sacred gears and Tiamat's treasure to go missing. After his sealing, she never saw him again, because Diedreg was actively avoiding her and she had a hard time tracking down the hosts of the now sealed dragon. But now she needed to decide. Did she want to punish Diedreg by letting the Ouroboros capture him and his hosts, letting her take revenge on the heavenly dragon? Or did she want the Ouroboros to find her long-lost treasure? It was truly a hard choice. On one hand, she had the possibility to get revenge on someone who had stolen something from her, and on the other hand, she could get that something back for the price of, wait, where's the hook? What do I need to do? The Ouroboros' expression didn't change. She had expected that question. You help me kill stupid Red. For a moment Tiamat thought the Ouroboros was set on eliminating Diedreg, but soon noticed that the dragon god wouldn't require help for that. That left, did the dragon god just request from Tiamat to fight Great fucking Red? How in the world was she supposed to be even as much as noticed by the dragon of dragons? The guy has enough power to destroy the entirety of the earth. Tiamat didn't see any possible way how she could help the Ouroboros against Great Red. Sorry, Ouroboros, I don't really see how I can help you with that. Ophis silently stared at Tiamat for a few seconds before answering. You'll help. Tiamat didn't know how to respond, so she stayed quiet until the dragon god rephrased her first question. What do you desire? Tiamat, seeing no way out of this, sighed and thought once more about the two options she had. After some thinking, she finally decided on getting her treasure back. She could still punish Diedreg once their paths crossed again. I desire my long-lost treasure. The Ouroboros nodded, before asking one more question. Will you join me against Great Red? Tiamat hesitated for a moment before sighing. Yes, I will. The smallest smile could be seen on the Ouroboros' lips, but Tiamat didn't notice. She was too distracted by the fact that she had just agreed to fighting Great Red. Do you know others that could help me? Tiamat once more hesitated. Should she tell the Ouroboros about Issei? If she would, Issei would get involved in things that probably didn't have to do anything with him and that could damage their relationship. But on the other hand, if the Ouroboros finds Issei and then finds out that Tiamat knew about Issei, the dragon god might get angry at Tiamat, and the dragon queen did not want to know what would happen if she had to face an enraged dragon god and didn't want to find out. Yes, 1. The Ouroboros didn't show any kind of reaction. Lead me to him. Tiamat had no other choice than comply. X =X =X. Issei was walking through Kuo. Why was he walking through Kuo? He did not know. Maybe he wanted to stay fit. Maybe Dante told him to do so. Maybe he tried to distract himself. Distract himself from the monster. From himself. From the bloodlust that was trying to get into his mind, break through his mask and devour everything in its path. He wouldn't be happy if something like that would happen. Not that he currently was happy. He was far from that. You could say his soul is in infinite torment, but if he would stop that torment, others would suffer, and he didn't want to make others suffer, just because he couldn't endure it. Most people would have given up long ago, but there was a reason why Dante had chosen the boy to be the next host of the Phoenix. Issei never gave up. The one Issei once called father had tormented him and tried to make him a loyal servant, but Issei refused to follow his lead. After the man revealed that his wounds meant nothing to him, Issei didn't stop his attempt at shooting the man and forcefully awakened the Phoenix's abilities to kill the man. And that's why Issei was in the worst situation that he could be in. If the monster reaches his brain, it could use Issei's determination to kill everything in this universe. But Issei would not give in to the monster. He would stand against it. Even if it meant that he could never smile. Even if it meant that love was a concept he couldn't grasp. Even if it meant for him to be in endless torment for the rest of time. He would not give up. Leave me alone, you bunch of creeps. A voice caught the boy's attention. Slowly rotating his head, he looked into an alley, where there were a bunch of thugs cornering someone. Judging from the voice, it was a girl. The thugs all had leather jackets. On the back of the jackets was a lion head whose mane was made out of red burning flames. Under the lion was the gang's name, Burning Lions. Very creative. It was obvious what they wanted to do with the girl. They wanted to rape the cornered girl. They wanted to sexually assault a girl. They wanted to torment her. Issei didn't like that. He wanted their blood. No, he did not. He didn't want something from them. He wanted them off the earth's face. He walked to the closest thug with silent footsteps. They all seemed to fixated on their victim to notice the dragon approaching. When he reached the first one, he punched him right in the head. Instant knockout. The thug fell to the ground, gaining the attention of the other thugs, but before any of them could do anything else, Issei had knocked out another thug. Who are? The boss thug, recognizable by his superior muscle mass, couldn't even finish his sentence before another lion hit the floor. You. Issei did not react to the man's words and was already about to deliver another knockout punch, but this time the thug he aimed for tried shielding himself by making an X with his arms in front of his face. In one fluid motion, Issei stopped his right hook, turned 270 degrees, backhanded the man with his left from the side, knocking him out, and then used the momentum to also knock out the thug next to the backhanded one with a right swing to the face. The boss thug's brain finally caught up with what was happening, and he spoke a command. Kill him. The other thugs, who seemed to be in a trance state from seeing Issei just casually knock their comrades out without a hint of emotion, took a few seconds before rushing the team. Issei casually continued knocking out thugs left and right, straight up ignoring the punches they threw at him. He didn't epically dodge their swings or blocked every single of their attacks, no. He just let them hit him, without receiving any physical damage, speeding up the process due to him only having to concentrate on knocking the thugs out. This didn't go unnoticed by the boss, who started sweating bullets when realizing that the boy was unfazed by the damage he was taking in. Get back. There was no way the boy wasn't associated with the supernatural in one way or another, and that meant that the boss could use his little secret weapon and reason why the gang was called Burning Lions. When the remaining gang members came back to their boss's side, he noticed that their number went from 16 down to 4, the boy was obliterating them. And he was approaching them. Formation. Burning Looms. Before the boss could summon his flames, he was hit square in the stomach, taking away his breath, but that shouldn't be possible. The boy had been 5 meters away when he had started to chant. No human could traverse such distance in such short amount of time. Thankfully, he wasn't knocked out in one blow like his underlings, and the boy didn't seem to notice that detail. He was already in the process of knocking the other 3 out. This was the boss's chance. Formation. Burning Lion. As the last of his underlings was knocked out, his body ignited into flames before those flames settled around his hands and feet. The boy, having knocked out the remaining thugs, looked back at the boss and started approaching the burning man. Thinking he had the advantage, the boss dashed forward, putting a large amount of power into his right arm before punching the boy right through the chest as if he was made of paper. A satisfied smile came onto the man's lips, but as he tried to pull his fist back, he couldn't move it. Being caught off guard for a moment, the man saw the boy holding his hand in place and noticed that the boy was staring him right in the eye. He was far from that, and that shocked the boss. Before he could do anything, a white fire appeared around the boy's wound, and when it came in contact with the boss's arm, he lit up like gasoline. At the same moment, Issei let go of the man's arm and started walking away, seeing that his business was done. While the man had already disintegrated completely. Not even ashes remained. Issei left the rest of the thugs alive but knocked out. The boss was the only one who hit him with enough power that would have been life-threatening if he was a normal human. Which meant he attacked with the intent of killing Issei. The rest of the thugs couldn't even scratch him, so he ignored them. Before leaving the alley, he abruptly stopped, turned around, bowed his head, and silently apologized for killing the man. How the girl he saved looked like, he did not know nor care. X == X=. What do you mean? Danaisik's gone. Rainier could not believe what she was hearing. Why yes, Lady Rainier, we haven't heard anything from him since you sent him to kill the anomaly. There are only 2 logical explanations to his disappearance. The first one was that he had betrayed them and returned to the Grigori, but if that were the case, they would have already been picked up by a Grigori patrol. The second was that Danaisik died, somehow. The guy was a war veteran and probably the strongest of the 4, seeing as how he was the closest to reaching a second pair of wings, but he didn't really think of himself much as a leader, more a strong warrior, and that's why Rainier was the one that led the group. Middle. The young fallen twitched at the mention of her name. Go and look if the anomaly has any detectable weaknesses. Lord Azazel said he wanted this town free of any possible threats, so if you can't kill him, find a way to trap him. Middle hastily nodded before spreading her single pair of wings and flying out of the church. Into the silent night, where somebody was eavesdropping on the fallen. X == X=. Who are you? A certain dragon god Loli was staring at Issei, who was staring back with his dead eyes, while seated on the couch in his living room. He had just come back home and was greeted by Tiamat and this other dragon when entering his home. Ophis was looking at him with vague interest in her eyes. The young dragon in front of her was vastly different from all the other members of her species she had met. All of them showed some kind of fear or respect when facing her, neither of them she found in the young dragon's eyes. All of the males tried seducing her in one way or another, this one didn't even talk to her. All of them made a lot of noise, this one was completely silent. His body wasn't the typical biological one. It didn't have any kind of organs, bones or other important things mortal creatures required to survive, not even a brain or hardware in his body. He also didn't really move if not necessary. She would have easily believed that he was paralyzed, wasn't it for the fact that she saw him walk into the house and sit down on the couch. He also didn't talk, at all. Not even answering her questions, and to be honest, she preferred that over him saying anything really. Ophis just looked into his empty void eyes. And she saw something that was very different in their emotionless ways. Her emotionlessness came from all the time in pure isolation. She had emotions somewhere buried deep within her, and sometimes they were shown by small gestures like miniature smiles or light frowns. His emotions, they didn't seem to exist. Most people would find such a state unsettling or creepy, but it reminded Ophis of something. The dimensional gap. The gap had been silent and hollow before Great Red came in and filled it with sound. Issei was in a similar state. Blank, empty, free of sound. She liked it. All those years she never found anything that resembled the gap before the red one appeared and filled it. Until now. There it was right in front of her. She couldn't help but feel a certain attachment to the dragon. She felt attracted to his presence, to his silence, to his very being. Was this love? Maybe. But Ophis now found something that was way more valuable than the already tainted gap. She had found a new place of silence. X=X=X=X. Oh, so Dante found himself another phoenix. Hades, one of death's strongest warriors, sat on his throne. He was one of the gods of death in this circle. It was his turn to make the phoenix fall. He raised his hand, and with the Ouroboros power. Ellipsis. Nothing happened. And with the Ouroboros power. Ellipsis. Still, nothing. Something has happened behind my back and I don't like the outcome. His snake was gone. The snake that Ophis had given him to make him join the Chaos Brigade. It had given him a tremendous power boost and he grew really attached to it. And now it was gone. Who the fuck made Ophis leave the Chaos Brigade? X=X=X=X. Issei was lying on his bed with a smile. What? Issei was on his bed, smiling, reading a porn mag. Okay, what the fuck? He was humming a simple tune to himself while going through the mag page for page, sometimes stopping to admire a beautiful pair of opie. His room was full of posters that had very eroge content all over them, and there were mountains of porn mags, hentai, porn DVDs and all other kind of pervert stuff. After finishing his current porn mag, Issei put it on top of one of the stashes and wandered to his computer. He booted the machine up and after entering his password the monitor revealed an unpleasant amount of hentai games on the desktop. His mouse wandered over one of them and he started it, selecting a new save file and started playing the game. On his face was a rather lustful expression that somehow was also a little bit peaceful. After a while he fucked up an audio dialogue and pressed the wrong button, causing his character to say something he did not at all intend to say. His face turned into one of shock and then sadness. Seconds later it turned out that his dialogue option triggered a secret sex scene and his expression changed into a surprised one and then into a self-satisfied one, before becoming lustful as the scene started. After finishing the game he stretched himself and walked to his window looking out into a void of pure nothingness. If he could, he would jump out and fill the void with everything he had, but he couldn't. He was trapped in this tiny room. The door was also locked and didn't allow anybody to leave nor enter. At first, he had a fit of panic and tried everything in his might to get out of the room. Breaking the window, puncturing the wall, lockpicking the door. Nothing worked. He was trapped and after a while he had accepted it. At least he could do whatever he wanted with this room, literally. The only limiter was his own imagination. And the limitation that he was the only living being in the room. He was ultimately alone even though it felt so wrong. It felt like he wasn't supposed to be alone, but he still was. Sometimes he could see a faint blue light far off in the distance trying to reach him, but it came never even close. Issei didn't want to escape this room, he wanted to banish the loneliness he felt here. The depressing feeling of knowing that he'll live alone and forever. But he needed to be let out to do something and for somebody to let him out. They needed to reach him and for that they needed to get the guy up there to open up his heart for them. But the heart was guarded.